You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So you guys are going to have to kind of forgive me right out the bat. A bunch of people that I know and some love, like family and friends, have actually come down with COVID. Now, I've been testing negative, fortunately. But I still have some sort of a cold or something. I don't know. It's just, it's really sapping my energy levels and I'm just not feeling very well. But you know what? It's nothing for me to saunter over to the chair from my bed and join you all once again to talk some Star Wars. Now, for this one, we thought we would do something a little bit different. As we like to do on Mondays, we'll do review shows, we'll do, various things that either talk about different concepts, different characters, different all kinds of stuff. So on this one, we're basically talking about that if you were basically in charge of Lucasfilm and it was your job to guide, I guess, the direction of Star Wars from here on out, or even if you just want to take it from the perspective of, as a fan, which would you rather see? Would you rather see them start to do projects that focused on the era before the prequels, or would you rather the stories take place after the sequels, meaning episode 7, 8, and 9? So that's pretty much, I think, where we're going to center our discussion today. Either before the prequels or after the sequels. You know, where should they start to put their focus? Because right now, the main focus seems to be in that immediate time period right after Return of the Jedi. And I think, other than that, you do get a smattering of the ever-popular in-between episodes 3 and 4. And that's generally where you're seeing everything. Sure, the comics or the books might explore something different, but for the most part, it's right after Return of the Jedi, which is what most of the Disney Plus shows are focusing on. And then the rest of them, it's in between episodes 3 and 4. So, what are your thoughts?
Oh, man. This is kind of a tough one, and this is the one I kind of created, honestly. But
yeah,
it was one of those things that...
This is all yours. I have to say, because I was sitting there thinking, like, wow, I gotta be a little bit more creative with the graphic now. I've got to try to really think about it's not like it's just some built-in, I can comment on something. Kind of wish that we had tackled something a little easier, like when we were focusing on just a trailer or something, being sick here. But you know what? I'll play along, and hopefully we get some good chats. We did actually get one chat, by the way, which I have to put this up because this is directed at you. It's from one of your friends. It's David Sumler Jr. says, another great week of Star Wars with the Detroit Lions' greatest offensive tackle.
I'm a defensive guy, David. He should know that.
Yeah, anyway. Well,
little brothers.
Hey, I'm just.
I know you just.
I'm impressed that you're even part of the Lions here. I didn't know that was a thing.
Me either. I wish I had a paycheck from them. Jeez.
Yeah, well, but at least you're not getting beat up every week. Although it depends on what you say on this show.
Yeah, so, that and preseason hasn't started yet.
That's true. That is very true. So which do you think? I mean, if you're talking before the prequels, after the sequels, I don't know.
It's really a difficult thing because on one hand, and this is what I struggle with, and this is why I kind of brought it up to everybody else because I wanted to know what everyone else thought. Because on one hand, you have now we kind of have some canon that takes place in the before the prequel era. And there is a substantial amount of time that hasn't been tackled. The High Republic era, right after the High Republic era, and you can even go further back till you get almost like 1,000 years to the Old Republic. So, I mean, there's a lot of space no pun intended, that you could really kind of cover there. However, you do have this open forum of after the sequels where you can kind of create your own thing and kind of start from scratch, and you really can just, make it your own at that point. So that, to me, that therein lies the question. Do you go with something that you have source material on, or do you go with something where you can be completely creative? Now, for me, I think that I would probably go with something like after the sequel trilogy, simply because there's no expectation. So if we're talking about the before the prequel time, meaning before Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, we talking about everything in that era. Well, now that we are we're creating canon in that space, the High Republic, Acolyte, those things are in that realm. Um, Now you have things to live up to because now there's material that supports that. However, if you kind of create something that's a little bit away from the typical lore or the typical foundation of Star Wars, and you kind of go a little bit after the sequel after the sequel trilogy, and you start to really look at, like, okay, where should Star Wars go? Where should these characters be? Because the thing is, the older you get, if you go with the prequel, I mean, before the prequel era, in some regards, um, it could, I can't say it should look vastly different, but I'm thinking like it has that whole Game of Thrones vibe to it. And it's kind of weird if you really think about it. And I know if I talked about it before, Eric, where in the prequels, it's all like Teletubby land, right? It looks all bright and green and things like that. And then you get to the original trilogy, and now everything looks all, you know, tore up and gunky and whatever. And so, of course, we kind of create the whole thing of like, well, that was, after the war, so everything has been kind of battle written and tarnished a bit. But there is a really big stark contrast, though, like when you look at the planets and everything like that, just the scenery of it all. So you got to wonder, like, okay, if you're going back before the war happened, is it completely bright and sunny and almost like Sesame Streetish, like sunny days and things like that? Or is it, does it still look like the more lived in universe that we see in A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, things of that nature? So that's one aspect of it. But for me, I think we need to get away, the further we get away from the Skywalker saga, I think the better, because that's where a lot of people have expectations. And then, of course, now you run the risk of messing up something that's already been established, or you coming too close to certain things, and it can get a little murky there. So for me, I would say let's go after the sequels and kind of just create brand new characters, and we can move away from the whole Ray and Poe and Finn. Let's move away from that and just kind of start fresh again. What about you?
Well, I mean, before I get into, I guess, some of the other points about the different eras, there is one choice that we're not really outlining here, where we're going before prequels or after sequels. And this applies to either choice, but this could also apply during, and that's a lateral move. And I often point to the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. That's a set of novels out right now that actually takes place in the unknown regions and also in the Outer Rim. And it basically deals with this whole political thing going on with the Chiss and some of their enemies. And you won't find, other than, like I said, one single cameo. Now, I haven't read the other two books, though, so I should reserve that. But so far, in the first book, which was called Chaos Rising, you only saw one tiny cameo of Anakin Skywalker, and it wasn't even because again, it time hops, right? So it takes place. I think actually that book takes place somewhere between episodes 2 and 3. But that's my point, is the fact that you don't necessarily have to go way after the sequels or before the prequels if you want to tell a story that does not involve the Skywalker saga. And that's something that I do feel that I should point that out. You know, that it basically is a lateral move to where you could still stay in the same time period. You can go into the time period of the original trilogy. Now, of course, depending on where you go, you would either have to go so far outside that the whole war between the Empire and the Rebellion and all that aren't necessarily affecting anything, such as the case with the Chiss. I mean, they'll reference it every once in a while, but if you want to avoid all that, then you would have to go either way after or way before. And of course, there is source material out there that has explored this. The Yuuzhan Vong, that whole thing would have taken place pretty much after the sequel trilogy if it had been canon. But, and this is where you have to be very, very careful, because if you go after the sequel trilogy, then you are going to be defining a new time period, which of course is part of the advantage, but it's also a really big disadvantage because it means you have to get it right. You can't mess that up. You know, so there is that. Now, of course, before the prequel trilogy, they've canonized part of it, I guess, with Darth Revan and all that, and couple of characters, but the whole Old Republic thing, I mean, we know that that's a thing. It's just that so far, to my knowledge anyway, there hasn't been any canonized story that deals specifically with that era. There was rumors that the whole Benioff and Weiss Star Wars movie or trilogy or whatever they were going to make was probably going to deal with that time period, but we don't really know now. So you could go that route. The High Republic, which is a brand new era that was created, seems to be gaining some traction. And because that is only in the novel/book sort of area and then also the comics, it has yet to make any appearance in a live-action setting or an animated setting. You can certainly do a project or two with that. And that would be brand new. Because again, sure, you have Yoda, but for the most part, it doesn't really deal in any way, shape, or form with the Skywalkers or that Jedi Order that Yoda reestablishes, because the Jedi Order is a lot different in the High Republic, so you have to remember that. This is actually kind of funny because Voyager chats in some. You seem to be the target of chats today, Daryl. He said, Daryl, you did not just call the prequels like the Teletubbies.
I did, because that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you and I remember when we first, because that was one of the things I thought when I first saw it in '99. If you look at Naboo looks completely like Teletubby Land. I mean, you almost expect to see the sun with the baby in it or something like that. I mean, it just does.
Right.
And again, you know, that's something else too, right? You can go lateral, again, exploring the lateral idea. You could go laterally into the prequel era, where the universe and the galaxy is fairly clean and pristine and new and prospering, you know, whereas obviously Lucas, when he created the original trilogy, wanted the universe to look lived in, and he partially wanted to do this because all sci-fi up to that point had been very sanitized and clinical and really new, and he wanted to show a lived-in universe, something that people could relate to that would be more realistic. And so, for that reason, he decided to go that route. And to be completely honest, that's a little bit more, I think, relatable to people. And it also is a commentary on that time period. I mean, you're not going to have this whole galactic war and still everything's all shiny, new, and pristine. You know, it's not going to happen. So I think that when you're dealing with where do you go in this? You have to consider things from all sides. And as far
True.
as taking place after the sequels go, if you take place after the sequels, then, like I said, you do run the risk of getting it wrong. But even then, I think people look at Star Wars in a very, and that's Lucas's fault because he started this whole thing episodically. You know, episode 4, 5, and 6, 1, 2, and 3, and now we have 7, 8, and 9. But it doesn't have to be so linear. You could, in essence, and I think that this is what they're going to do, through the television series that we're getting now, I think they're going to end up sort of softly rebooting the sequel trilogy. They're not going to negate it. They're not going to remake the sequels. What they're going to do, I think, is they're going to tell stories that happen laterally, again, in the same time period as the sequels, and that will become the new sequel trilogy. I should also take this time, because I always forget to do this at the beginning of the show. If you haven't yet done so, please hit that like button, because, of course, it helps us grow the channel and put us in front of more people. And if you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, do that. If you want to donate to the channel, we got a link in the description to do that. So we appreciate the support that you guys consistently give us. It's really good because we get to bring stuff like this to you. But again, they could do the same thing if they go after the sequel trilogy, because you said, okay, no more Poe, no more Rey, no more. They could, if they wanted to, take those characters and tell us what happened to them. Although that would probably be a bad idea considering they weren't that popular. We'll see what happens with time. Maybe in time, you know, I wouldn't have minded seeing if they had allowed Kylo Ren to live. It would have been cool to see what he did as Ben Solo afterward. Like I said, one of the biggest issues that I've always had with Star Wars is they'll redeem all these people, but then they kill them. You know, it would be wonderful to actually see what would happen if you get somebody like a Darth Vader, somebody like a Kylo Ren. They turn back to the light side, but now they have to deal with the aftermath of all these atrocities that they did, and people maybe not trusting them. And them having that challenge, that would make some really compelling stuff. But they don't seem to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that would be great storytelling, and I think that's something that hasn't been done, you know, especially it's not in Star Wars, you know, and that's a thing, you know, where you kind of have someone who um was legitimately on the opposite side, and then now they're trying to win the trust of those who they were once fighting against.
I
Yeah,
mean, that would just be
that's really good.
That would just be something. And okay, the Vader thing I get, but they had the opportunity to do it with Kylo.
Yeah,
You know, they didn't have to kill him off.
The better move. Yeah, Kylo would have been the better move, and then it would have definitely made more sense, like those two going off to set up the new Jedi Order and things like that. I mean, that would have been really good, because then now you could have Kylo, who's been on both sides of the coin, kind of fill in some gaps for Rey, but then also kind of like dealing with students, and like, you know, when students want to use darker things, he could kind of step in like, hey, you might not want to do that, and here's why. You know, so I think that would, like you said, that would make great some great compelling stories.
Now,
For me though, yeah. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say the flip side though, and this is kind of mirroring what you were saying, is that I could see going both ways though, because you could establish all these new stories and everything and tell beyond the sequel trilogy and establish, and you would definitely be away from everything then. And of course, if they ever make Rogue Squadron with Patty Jenkins, that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to take place after the sequel trilogy. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I think that they've already established the things that are happening before the prequels, which is why it would either be a smarter move to do that, give us the Old Republic. They definitely need to give us a High Republic thing because they've already established it. That's the new thing that they've been doing, and it hasn't been brought into any kind of a live action or animated movie, television, whatever realm yet. And or you do something a little bit more, like I said, lateral, or maybe it's kind of like a Thrawn ascendancy thing, to where you tell stories that are happening during the time period of the prequels, original series, or original trilogy rather, or the sequel trilogy, and you just simply, hey, here's what's going on another side. And they've experimented with that even within the Skywalker saga, right? Like, we got to see, hey, what was Ahsoka doing during episode 3?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really important thing that they did when they made that last season of the Clone Wars, because you established her to such a degree. Filoni created her for the Clone Wars to give a little bit of a foil to Anakin. Okay, now you have a Padawan, and you got to deal with the same crap that you've been giving Obi-Wan, and it would be fun and all this other stuff. But then it comes down to you establish a character that is basically hanging around this guy all the time, and it just means that by the time you get to episode 3, her absence is very notable. So the fact that they went in and said, hey, here's what she's doing during that time period. You could do things like that. And I'm not necessarily saying, hey, let's find out what, some secondary character is doing. But you can tell completely different stories that have nothing to do with the Skywalker saga, but do happen to just take place during that same time period.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I said, for me, I think I would rather start with the sequel or post sequel, just because, I mean, yeah, I know you have to get it right, but I think it allows for no expectations except for the fact that it has to feel like Star Wars. So as long as it has that feeling, in a sense, as far as like the characters, the way it's shot, the tone of everything, as long as you have that, okay, this feels like home, pretty much, then I think you're on the right path, and then you just plug the stories in. However, with the High Republic, are you going back into those eras once again? I think because you have source material now, if you deviate anywhere from it, now people are going to be like, oh, well, that's not how it happened. Skir was supposed to be this, and Greystorm that, and it's like, okay, well, even though they're not as solidified as Luke, Han, and Leia, but it's still like we have something to reference these characters on, and
Well,
I
that
think that
depends.
sometimes it's kind of it sets up bad expectations.
Again, though, just because you focus on the High Republic era does not mean you have to focus on those characters.
Well, why wouldn't you though? I mean, because I mean, like, if there's an era that hasn't been established as far as visually, like we've never seen anything, nothing as far as TV show, movies, or things like that, and the only thing that we have are the books and comics. Why wouldn't you use what's already there, especially since that's brand new itself?
Well, I mean, the idea that it being brand new, yeah, but again, you can, and I guess it just really depends on when we're talking about new stories, and that's why I think that it was smart when you actually put this as a new stories, not if you want to see a new movie, which do you want to be? If you want to see a new TV show, which would it be? Because we could be talking about books or comics. This is just projects in general. It doesn't necessarily have to be a film or a television series. It's almost just, where do we want to put the actual emphasis? Now, I mean, obviously, it's easier for them to jump around if they're doing books or comics, because all you got to do is basically write the thing or illustrate it. So, I mean, I would suggest that maybe the movies and the television shows is probably going to be the thing that would have the greatest reach as far as an audience. So obviously you would entertain this. But with the High Republic, though, you could, as long as you established it maybe in different stages, because you have to understand something too, because again, I know you haven't really read a lot of the books. And I mean, honestly, I haven't read a whole lot more than you have, but I have read enough to know that there's entire High Republic series where they just concentrate on different characters. You know, there's it's not like a lot of these other projects that they've done in the past to where you have this core group of characters and you're seeing them in different areas. I mean, you know, there's books that don't feature any of the ones that you and I read about in the comics, for instance. They're
Hmm.
completely new. And I think that that was a smart thing for them to do with the High Republic, actually, is because you can do that. You can, say, create a movie that doesn't deal with anybody from the books or the comics, but yet it takes place during that era. I mean, technically, if you really want to get technical, that's exactly what they're doing with the Acolyte. The Acolyte takes place during the High Republic era. As far as we know, it doesn't feature anybody from any of that stuff.
No, but I think, but because of the subject matter of what it is, um, it just feels a little bit different because like I said, we have never had any type of visual um representation of what the Sith are doing, what the dark side is all about. We haven't seen that. I mean, yes, there's been books where you've got like, Lords of the Sith and things like that. But I mean, I'm just talking about like overall, like we haven't had anything like that. We've got tons of what the Jedi are doing. I mean, like, yes, there's been different eras, if you will. No different than like, the Superman, like you got the golden era, you got all these different eras of Superman, but by and large, like Superman doesn't change. He's pretty much the same kind of person, conceptually. But the thing is that for this though, like, okay, we've seen the Jedi in so many different realms, and don't get me wrong, like this is still a cool thing. Like the High Republic is still a very interesting time period. I'm just saying that if you already have this stuff established, I mean, even if just use the characters that you kind of already have, because if you create new characters almost out of nowhere, then it's kind of like, well, people might be like, well, who are they? I've never read anything. Like for those who did read, like, okay, well, who are these people? Like,
Well, I was going to
never
say,
heard of these
yeah,
folks
for
before.
those who did
It
read,
yeah.
but
I
I
mean,
mean,
there are a lot of people on the bestseller. I mean, it's on the bestsellers list, so a lot of people have read it. So my thing is, it's like they'll go to the theaters expecting to see some people or hear or see stories that of people that
maybe.
they've read about, and they're not there. So it's just kind of like, well, what the heck is this?
I mean, I think it depends on how it's put because the way the High Republic is structured, it's not like the prequel era Jedi.
True.
It's sort of
It's
like they're spread all
It's not
over
like
the
you have a
place.
fixed group, right?
Right.
It's not like you have a fixed
Exactly.
group
It's not
of
a fixed group. I mean, if you
yeah.
come out and it feels similar to what they've been reading and maybe they reference things if, they have to or whatever, then it's perfectly acceptable even to fans of the High Republic because they're already used to this. There's like 3 or 4 different High Republic series out right now. That's why I'm having a hard time
Mhm.
figuring it out because I remember I read that first one, The Light of the Jedi, and then I'm trying to remember the one that I picked up next. But then I found out it wasn't even the second book to that. It was the second one, I think chronologically, that came out, but it wasn't even the second book. And then I
Mhm.
ended up reading the second book to Light of the Jedi. And the thing that I found very interesting was the fact that it's like it doesn't matter because they're not, even though there's somewhat of an overall storyline with the Nile and even the Drengir in some cases, but for the most part, it's
Mhm.
not. It's just individual. In fact, and here comes the Star Trek reference of the night. If they wanted to do an episodic, strictly episodic Star Wars series, I'm talking TV now. Kind of like the original Star Trek series or Next Generation, or of course what they've returned to in Strange New Worlds, to
Mhm.
where you have each. It's more like the adventure of the week kind of thing. The High
Mhm.
Republic completely lends itself to that.
Yeah, that I agree with. Absolutely.
You know, and that's then, and you could do that too, right? Like you can just bring in newer characters. I mean, they're doing that anyway. I mean, even the authors are bringing in new characters every other book, it seems. You know, there's a, and that's what I mean by it's like, well, you know, maybe if you do a movie or something like that, you need to bring out the characters that we already know. And it's like Skier, for instance. You'll bring him up. He really hasn't appeared in that much. He's been in that one comic series, and then he's referenced in like Light of the Jedi and a couple other things. But he's by far he's not in a lot of the books or any of that stuff. So it's kind of like you really wouldn't know what to even put any of these characters in. I mean, it's not like hey, when they made a movie out of this, I didn't see X, Y, or Z. Now, of course, you might get that if people have read enough of the material and they, you know, say like Greystorm or something, you know. It's kind of like, oh, well, I really like that guy. I wish he had been in this. But it's not like they're going to criticize because he should have been and he wasn't. It's really more like, you know what? I kind of like the stories that I read about him. Would like to see him in live action.
So would you say that the High Republic is better suited for like Disney Plus streaming?
Oh, I've always said that. I've said that every time you and I bring it up. I always say that I'm not ruling out a movie, and I'm not ruling out an entire trilogy of films, actually. It's just, if you're going to start it out, I think that definitely, you know, it's way more suited. I'd say that about the Old Republic, too, though. But I think I could see, I think just because of the nature of the way the High Republic's even being written in a comic and in a book setting, I think it definitely lends itself. Not to mention the fact that you can do more, right? Because you can have the thing go, especially if it's an animated show, you could do like, you know, 20 episodes if you want per season.
Well, let me ask you this question then. So, on the opposite end of that, so if they did like a new trilogy in but post sequel trilogy, you know, but post sequel era, I should say, there's this theme so far that we have with Star Wars. So, you know, in the original trilogy we had Han, Luke, and Leia. Those were like, you know, the big three. And then we get to the sequels. Now we have Rey, Finn, and Poe. They kind of almost mimic, in a way, the original cast. And I know that was done intentionally. So if we were to do a sequel, another sequel, would we need to have that somewhat cookie cutter big three that have that kind of reminds us of Han, Luke, and Leia, or should they be completely different types of people?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I would think that
And this is not just to you. This is for everybody. Voyager, Ronaldo, anybody who may be, you know, listening or watching. You know, please leave your, you know, thoughts in the comments if you know, have some ideas. But
well, we do have one comment from Voyager that's been hanging around for a minute here while we've been arguing about the High Republic. Or no, I'm sorry, it was actually David. I thought it was Voyager. It's David that said this. Give Palpatine the Star Wars equivalent of Thanos' Infinity War. I already had the title. Palpatine, how I became the greatest of all time.
Yes, I've turned my little brother on to to Palpatine. He loves just.
Well,
I just explained to him who Palpatine really kind of is, and he's just been like totally enamored with him ever since.
Well, then he's definitely
like,
going to want to watch
movies.
Then he's definitely going to want to watch our whole we did a show not terribly long ago. Although it's probably been a minute. It has probably been a minute. Has it been that long? I thought maybe it was in the fall or something. But whatever, if you go back
close to it, we're already in August.
Yeah, that's true. If you go back, we actually did, I think, a top 10 actors. Maybe it was top 5. It was something like that. Actors that we want to see in a Palpatine series. Because I think that we decided
kind of broke down Palpatine.
Yeah, we broke down Palpatine, what makes him who he is, and why each of these particular actors who have been rumored would make a really good Palpatine. So you're going to want to check that out if you're a Palpatine fan, and especially if you want to see a Star Wars project that features him, because it's long been rumored that there's going to be a Palpatine series at some point that would go and talk about his origins, which, of course, is what we were basing that show on. And I think our favorite was still Tom Hiddleston to play a young Palpatine. I think that's still probably the best choice.
Hiddleston and what is it? Skarsgård. I think that was the other one.
Yeah, and we had a Benedict Cumberbatch, I think, on there too. There was some crossover with the Thrawn actors actually, but there were some really interesting actors that were brought up to play Palpatine actually. But Hiddleston, I still think has the right look and also has that he's got the acting, the demeanor, the acting chops to where he can go back and forth between, you know, whatever. It would just be really interesting to see the origins of him with Plagueis and how he came to be. And that's one of the actual things where, because again, and sorry if I seem all over the place, guys. Like I said, I'm sick and I'm really feeling it. But basically, Palpatine is the exception to the whole we don't really need to see the origin story thing. Because I remember the idea of a Yoda origin story came up. But you could do that now. And I think that you and I had basically agreed, actually, that a Yoda origin story would be cool if that wasn't the entire focus. And I think that could happen with the High Republic, because Yoda's in the High Republic.
Yeah.
So that
you can touch on his stuff here and there and get the gist of what it. But Palpatine is one of those guys, like, you kind of, I need to know. Yeah, like, he's kind of like the enigma. He's more of an enigma to me than Yoda. Simply because, like, okay, where did he come from? How did he get to this point? You know what I mean? So yeah, that will be, and then of course, like, he's super, super powerful. Like, the man is master manipulator, super powerful. I mean, he's kind of, as you know, David said, you know, he's kind of like Thanos in a way, where he's calculating, he's powerful, and you know, he just has so many different attributes. And that's what I'm saying. Like, now that would be, I could see that being like a cool either series, or I don't see that necessarily being a trilogy based on that. I would see that more as a nice standalone movie or a series, like maybe a couple of season series on that. But
yeah, well, because here's the thing that I think a lot of people forget. You kind of already saw his origin story in a sense. I mean,
yeah,
we didn't
how he became emperor, yes.
Yeah, because exactly, it's sort of like, you know, I mean, that's basically how he became the emperor, how he became this super powerful being. What would be interesting, though, is just to go back and see his Sith Lord training and how he even got to the point, you know, and then seeing
like,
some of
what
that
did he
duality.
struggle with?
Right.
Yeah, like, I would love to see that aspect of it. Like,
what did he struggle with? You know, how did he best his master? How did he get to be so powerful? You know, but I mean, I think we have like the origin story that matters. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But yeah, for back to my question though, is like, okay, if we did something in the sequel, a post sequel era, do we need the cookie cutter?
Oh yes, the cookie cutter. Three space
three amigos,
buddies.
Basically. Yeah, the three amigos going out and like,
pretty much.
But they're reminiscent. But they're reminiscent of Han, Luke, and Leia, though. Or can they be different types of characters now? Like, what would you rather see? No, what I mean by that is like, someone doesn't have to be the hot shot, maverick pilot. The other guy doesn't have to be, or the chick doesn't have to be super strong and and you have some dreamy-eyed, guy that's,
Well,
like,
but
oh
they
yeah, we
did
can
turn
change the world type thing.
they did sort of, though. I mean, to be fair to the sequel trilogy, they did sort of turn that on its ear. Okay, now the Poe Dameron character is pretty much like the Han Solo character. That's a given. But Rey really is more like the Luke character. Just slightly different, but essentially the same. And Finn, I mean, honestly, you can't really say that
See,
Finn's like the Leia character because he's not.
no. See, that I was about to say, like, Finn's character was the most unique
Yeah, that's why I think
out of
he was
everybody.
wasted. Right.
Exactly.
Plus,
No,
he was a
absolutely.
former stormtrooper. I mean, again, that's why it's really too bad they didn't actually explore that whole angle. Here you got a stormtrooper who's looking around going, I don't think we're on the right side of this. And so maybe we need to do something a little bit different. And so you do. And he leaves the order, and he then joins up with, essentially, I mean, they call it the resistance, but it's basically the rebellion, right?
Right.
And so I think that they could have explored more, and that's the thing, is that you have the biggest crime of the sequel trilogy. Well, the biggest crime is they didn't have a plan. But
Yes.
tied directly to that, though, because you can actually tie this second crime to the first one, and that is they didn't take some of the more interesting characters or situations and develop them more. They handled that part of it wrong.
Right.
So I mean, I think that there's some things there that could have been done differently. But in answer to your question, though, I don't necessarily think that you have to do that, except for the fact, well, one, it does depend on what story you're trying to tell, but you have to remember that when Lucas is doing this wasn't uniquely Star Wars. I think what a lot of times people forget is Star Wars really isn't pure. It's sort of
Right.
like rock music that way, right? Where it's
an amalgamation.
yeah, it's an
of different
amalgamation
stuff.
of different types of things, and that's the thing. Star Wars is an amalgamation of some very classic storytelling tropes that were put together in the right combination, added with the right amount of originality to then give us this juggernaut that is still going on today.
Yeah, I always call Star Wars the Michael Jackson of movies because, you take, Michael Jackson took a bunch of different things. He took stuff from James Brown, Fred Astaire, pantomimes and street dancer performers and stuff like that. He kind of crafted that into his performances along with his own imagination. And there you go. So he just kind of popularized more or less.
Speaking of which, Michael Jackson really wanted to be cast in The Phantom Menace.
He did.
In fact, I believe he was trying to play Jar Jar.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. So
which would have been.
I mean, it's an interesting. I mean, hey, you brought up Michael Jackson. There's a little bit of trivia involved, Star Wars related. I just felt the need to put it out there. But I don't necessarily think that you have to follow that template in quite the same way as you did. Maybe that's the best way, because if you think about it,
yeah,
the prequels kind of did that too, but in a different way. And with different groups of characters, because in The Phantom Menace, you basically had Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Padme. I mean, sure, you had Anakin as well, but that's, if you really want to, Anakin can be like Chewbacca or something. Well, maybe, Jar Jar would be more like that.
Jar Jar, Chewbacca, yeah.
So Anakin would be more like R2 or something, even though R2 was there. But, but you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like he was sort of seconded. Those are really the three main characters. And then, of course, it became Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme. They were the Han, Luke, and Leia of the original trilogy. Or, I'm sorry, the prequel trilogy. But
yeah.
But they did handle it in a different way, though. Just like the original trilogy, obviously, was its own way. And then, of course, you had the sequel trilogy, which they sort of did it. And so what they're doing is they're trying to keep that particular storytelling device that helps define what Star Wars is and just tweaking it a little bit. However, again, that said, you could totally turn that around because you only need to point to the novels. And there's a lot of times where they don't feature that at all. It might be a lone character. It might be one or two characters. And you can very easily violate that and not have it feel differently from Star Wars. You know, just like you could actually have the whole like trio of adventurers out on the latest journey or something and still have it not feel like Star Wars. So I don't necessarily think that it defines. I think that it's an important ingredient in Star Wars, but I don't think it necessarily defines Star Wars, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have I don't have a problem with it being like a trio of characters that kind of bonded together. I mean, I actually kind of like that because you kind of get the mixture of personalities. But my thing is, I just want it to not be always so reminiscent of uh things that we've seen already. Like, okay, like I said, the sequels kind of mimicked Han, Luke, and Leia almost on the nose with like I said, like we said, with the exception of Finn. It was pretty much like cookie cutter, you know. So what I would like is to see, if they do another trilogy like that, let's get some different dynamic in there. I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Oh, that's a good thing. And I mean, I'll give you an example of it's sort of in the same realm of at least fantasy, and that's Lord of the Rings. You know, you have that group of adventurers that, I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do, or even if you go once again to Star Trek, say the original series, McCoy, Kirk, and Spock. You know, I mean, it's the same kind of camaraderie. It's the same kind of deal. It's a trio of characters, but yet it doesn't feel like Han, Luke, and Leia. So you could keep the same formula without it feeling the same. I think that that's really the important thing. And I would agree. I think that if you're going to create, it doesn't matter what time period you put it in, it has to feel differently. That's why I really enjoyed the whole Mandalorian with Din, Grief, and Kara. I mean, that was kind of a trio of people.
True.
You know, I mean, even though it became, in season 2, Grief and Kara basically were more
side characters.
Yeah, and they were appearances only. It wasn't like they were on the journey with him for very much of it, but still. It just shows you how within Star Wars you can do it without it feeling like they're repeating the same formula.
True. So I gotta get your deciding factors. What side would you rather go with?
Oh, gotta choose? I have to choose.
Red pill or blue pill?
Pills I don't have a problem with.
Especially right now.
Yeah, right? Yeah, right now. Goodness. Yeah, right now I'd love some.
You probably could go for a pill right now.
I could go for, yes, I could definitely go for a pill right now. Something to at least calm the sore throat down, which is why it's such a great idea doing a podcast at the moment. Yeah, if I had to choose between the two of them, because I mean, okay, to set it up, on one hand, I guess it's fair to say that after the sequels would probably be the more compelling choice. Even though before the prequels would be equally compelling too, but I would say that because we have some establishment of what happens before the prequels, it makes the sequels kind of feel like the unknown regions. You know, where before the prequels might be sort of like the Outer Rim. Not really explored, but we kind of know what's there already. The unknown regions is and then of course you have wild space, you know, and of course for anybody that has no idea what I'm talking about, these are all different areas of the galaxy in Star Wars. So, you know, it's just me kind of nerding out a little bit here, torturing a metaphor, but essentially I'm probably going to go with what the Disney marketing department would probably go with, and that's before the prequels. Because I still think that you can actually build up a little bit more of a foundation that I think would positively benefit projects that take place after the sequels if we have a little bit more foundation of what came before. Because if you think about it, either way, you're going to have an issue, right? If you do too much even after the sequels, granted, something like the Old Republic you can get away with because it's so long ago, you can almost say, look, it doesn't affect anything. But I would love to see some Old Republic stuff, origins of the Jedi, the Sith. Of course, anybody that's played the Knights of the Old Republic game would just be like, look, just take that game, make a script out of it, and give us a trilogy. Because it's that good of a story. That would be cool. The other thing that's, of course, before the prequels is the High Republic. And they just spent a lot of time and money coming out with this brand new era of Star Wars that's really exciting, really compelling, and I'd like to see it. That doesn't mean I don't, again, and I'm sure you're probably the same way. I mean, when we illustrate these choices, that doesn't mean it's, you know, we want to see this and not that. It just means which do we think it would make sense or which would we rather see personally? And as Daryl indicated earlier, we want to know what you guys' thoughts are as well. So yeah, I still think there's a lot of meat on that bone that needs to be picked off. So
Okay.
I think I'm gonna go before the prequels. Even though, I mean, look, I could sit here and debate this as long as my throat holds up. Because I was going to say all night, but that's clearly not the case right now. Because I could actually make a bunch of compelling arguments afterwards, right? I mean, one of the things that obviously it wasn't canon that took place was the Yuuzhan Vong. And that was really, really, really cool. And that just shows you the kinds of things they could do. But if I had to choose between just these two, I'm going before prequels. Because, you know, then there's the whole lateral argument that I would make too. But
okay. All right. Yeah, I'm definitely sticking with my
after the sequels,
post-sequel. Yeah, my post-sequel era. I just think that clean slate. I think you can, you know, develop, and you can have that time to develop these characters. You can really plan out where you want this thing to go, without having to worry about bumping up against anything or interfering with canon per se. I mean, if you're going away from the whole Skywalker saga, if you're completely just launching forward, you don't have anything to really worry about in that regard. So those are my main things, and I just would love to see what new technology that they will have in that space as well.
Now that's a really good argument, because I was going to say some of the other things that you mentioned. First of all, if you go back to the Old Republic, all those same points are valid. You're not going to bump up against canon at all if you do that. But even one of the things that I wanted to say too, I want to give props to the writers of the High Republic. See, this is what happens when you really plan stuff. The thing about the High Republic era that to me is the most exciting is it isn't bound by canon as heavily as the Skywalker saga is. And I think that that's because with the Skywalker saga, you're following one group of people. Whereas with the High Republic, I guess, yeah, if you started messing with some of the really established characters in there, and they've already done a few things, you have to be careful. But you can come up with new stories in that era and not even worry about canon, because the High Republic is all over the place as far as where it's taking place. Just like I think that you could probably safely And this is another thing that we really haven't explored too, and that's in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. There's enough time in there that you can tell stories that say take place halfway through, of the 15-year mark. And if it doesn't have anything to do with the Skywalker saga, you're free as a bird. But yeah, I agree. I mean, if you go after the sequels, what's really cool about that is that you can now establish brand new everything. Brand new governments that are there, brand new, it's just all new. But I think that that's also challenging, and I think that they're going to get there. I think what they're trying to do with the sequels is maybe try to get there organically and just, which is why I think that they're starting with after Return of the Jedi. I think that they're going to establish all these characters and all these stories that happen in a wide variety of stuff, right? And then they're just going to build and build and build, and then pretty soon it's just going to get to the point of, hey, this is happening at the same time as the sequel trilogy, and pretty soon it takes place after. But I don't know. That's just like Rogue Squadron. Were you surprised when you found out it took place after Episode 9?
Yeah, actually, I was. I mean, I was kind of happy, but I was very much surprised. But and I've always wanted to see kind of almost like what that would look like. Well, a movie like with the subject matter would look like, because I'm in my mind, of course, I'm thinking like Top Gun, but in space. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think the sequel trilogy provides us, post sequel era would provide us brand new stories, brand new landscape. You don't have to worry about anything that kind of really happened beforehand. I think you can, of course, you got brand new characters, but just like they had, you could do that same thing with the before the prequels. I'm just saying that there's a lot more. You could rely on a lot more with the prequel era. Because there are stuff in there that you can touch on or not. But I mean, you don't have to do it. But I mean, it would just make more sense to do it because since it's there.
Well,
but I just think for me, the sequel will be, a little bit more. You have a blank canvas, and that's the thing I like about it. You have a blank canvas, and you have time to really plan it out, almost like how the Marvel universe did, where you have phases, and you can kind of really take it like, okay, we're going to go from here to here to here to here, and excuse me, I think that would be more beneficial for the franchise moving forward.
Well, and that's the thing that I find really interesting about this is actually, it really didn't occur to me until we've been going back and forth on this, but this isn't really true with the High Republic as much. But if you go back to the Old Republic, it's almost the exact blank slate that you would get after the sequels. Because the Old Republic ends at something like 10,000 years before. I mean, it takes place so long before Phantom Menace. Yeah, so I mean, you're talking. I mean, it might as well be. It's a different time because you can always say, well, nothing's really going to affect canon at this point because you had the big Jedi Sith War, the whole thing, and everything changed anyway. So you can do whatever you want. Now, of course, the only thing that's bad about going that far back, though, but they sort of took care of this even in the comics, and that is, once again, it's a Star Trek problem, right? You have something like Star Trek Discovery. You have Strange New Worlds. Why is it that their technology is so shiny and new compared to the original series? Well, of course, the answer is because the original series was made in the 60s. So, you're almost trapped by that. On the other hand, what's cool about Star Wars is with the regality and the opulence of times past, It's almost like the further back you go, the more shiny and the more new and the more technological it could be, because you could say that war and all this stuff destroyed a lot of these things. So
Yeah,
there's
that's
even
true.
a built-in excuse as to if you start making old Republic movies in like 2026 or something. It's like, well, wait a minute. This happens before Phantom Menace, which was made in like 1999. Why does it look so amazing? Well, there's already an in-universe explanation for that.
Right.
So either way you go, but either way, and this is a point I want to make. Either way, what you actually said, I think, is what they would need to do. Create the whole thing in almost Marvel-like phases. Say, look, here's where we want to go, and here's the collection of I mean, they could do it where you have a bunch of standalones that culminate into some group thing, almost like a standalone, then an Avengers movie, then a bunch of standalones, and Avengers movie. You could do something like that. But however they want to structure it, if you do it in phases, then you're guaranteed to have continuity. And I think that that's the important thing, no matter which era you decide to go in.
True. But to borrow your line, it's not about
That's right.
It's not what we think, though. It's about what you guys think.
Sure enough, isn't.
So please definitely leave your comments in the comment section and let us know. What do you think? Do you think Star Wars would be better off creating more stories before the prequels, or should they start completely after the sequel trilogy? So definitely let us know.
Yeah, we would completely be interested in what you guys are thinking, because obviously it's the fans that have to consume this, and as we all know, fans will complain if they don't like something. So, like Daryl said, leave your comments in the comment section, and don't forget to hit that like button. If you guys enjoyed this video and you enjoy what we do here, hit the like button, because it really does help us. The YouTube algorithm loves the likes, and that allows us to get frankly, in front of more people, so we have even larger discussions. Want to thank everybody that came and chatted with us tonight. Voyager, David, thanks, guys. Appreciate it as always. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and if you want to go that extra step, you want to donate, either a one-time donation, could be like $1 or something, or maybe you want to take advantage of some of our packages that we have for monthly donations. Feel free to hit us up. The link is in the description, and it's part of the Buy Me a Coffee program, but of course it's Buy Us a Blue Milk. So until Friday, we don't really know what we're talking about yet, do we? I don't remember if we...
Star Wars, I think.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, sometimes we've talked about Cobra Kai for like 20 minutes on the show. But true. Yes, Daryl's correct. It'll probably be something Star Wars related, so you're going to want to join us this Friday, 8 o'clock. We will be live. Till then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.